Hey, feeling good, like I should. When in dark, I walk around the neighborhood, feeling blessed.
Alrighty, let's take a look at our first study guide that was assigned yesterday in preparation for the test on Friday. The first question here says, if you know the diameter of a circle, how do you find the area of that circle? Explain the steps. All right, so no, let's just do this a little bit of time. I'll just unveil it all. Okay, so first off, you got yourself a circle, you got yourself the diameter. Doesn't really matter what the diameter is, but if you're going to find the area of the circle, oh, I do not like that one bit. Let me go here, here, here. If you're going to find the area of that circle, you need to know what the radius is. And so your first step is to find the radius, because the radius is always equal to whatever the diameter is cut in half. So you're going to have to find half the diameter. Once you know what the radius is, then order of operations says square that number. And so when you square it, you would then do the third step, which is to multiply it times pi. Once you know what that product is, you will have your answer, and then you just declare the answer using square units. So for instance, if our radius, well, hold on, if our diameter was 14, then our radius has to be 7. And maybe we'll call those inches. So we would square this, because pi r squared, so that becomes, the area is going to be 49, right? The radius squared, and that would be square inches times pi. And pi, if you choose to make it 3.14, 49 times 3.14 is going to give you 153.86. If you had chosen pi to be 22/7, that would actually give you an answer of 154. If you chose to take 49 and multiply it times the pi on the calculator, you almost get 154, but it's still just a little bit less. So those are the steps, and you'll want to apply those steps anytime you are given the diameter of a circle and you need to find the area. So what is the diameter of a circle with a circumference of 47.12 feet? All right, so to find the diameter, since the formula for circumference is to take pi times the diameter, if you know the circumference, you can take your circumference and divide it by pi, and that will give you the diameter. And we learned in one of the first lessons of this unit that pi is very, very close to 3, and the relationship between the circumference and the diameter is like a scale factor of 3. You multiply 3 times the diameter to give you the circumference, or the approximation, and you would divide that by 3 to get the diameter. So if you took 47 divided by 3, you get somewhere close to 15. That's the only answer that would fit in this situation. If you know the radius of a circle, how do you find the circumference? All right, so now we're going to, ooh, that's too much. Really? There we go. Okay. So now we're going to go in the other direction, since once again, we know that when you double the radius, that's going to give you the diameter, and you need to have the diameter in order to find the circumference, since you multiply the diameter times pi to give you the circumference. So you would double the radius to find the diameter, then you'd multiply that number times pi to find the circumference, and then of course you need to label it just in linear units, so there'd be no exponent. So it would just be the circumference is going to be a number of centimeters, or a number of inches, or a number of feet, or whatever your unit of measurement is. So here, a bicycle has a circumference of approximately 81.68 inches. So if we're going to find the radius of the tire, we need to go through a process here where we find the diameter first. So take the circumference divided by pi. That gives you something really close to 26. And so we'll go ahead and label that for the diameter of the tire, and then the radius is half of that, so that would be 13. Now to the back side. A pizza is advertised, I guess maybe I'll show all that. Pizza is advertised as containing 250 square inches of pizza. Is 250 the area or the circumference? And since it's square inches, we know it must be area. So find the diameter of this pizza. Well, if you're going to use the area formula, you're going to find the radius. Once we know what the radius is, then you double it. to give you the diameter. This is a little bit trickier of a problem, but it's something that you should be able to figure out because we've squared numbers before. I'm not sure that we've talked too much about what it means to square root a number, but let's just talk ourselves through this. If we know that the area is 250 square inches, and we know that you multiply pi times the radius squared, then the pi is the known amount. That's not the variable. The variable is the r. So if we divide each side by pi, then we're going to isolate our r squared. So it turns out 250 divided by pi is around 79.6. So now what number would you multiply times itself to give you 79.6 for an answer? And if you start thinking, all right, well, 7 times 7 is 49, 8 times 8 is 64, 9 times 9 is 81, this is pretty close to 81. So our radius is probably a little bit less than 9. And of course, you can do your guessing and checking and say, what is 8.9 times 8.9 times 8.9? That give you pretty close to 79.6. I don't think anybody wants to go into the hundreds, so yeah, we'll just call that good. And then you double it for the diameter, and that answers this problem here. And then what do we have here? Answer these questions about 4 different circles. What is the circumference of a circle that has a diameter of 20? Well, when you multiply that times pi, you get something around 60, and it's 62.8. What's the circumference of a circle that has a radius of 5? Well, if its radius is 5, the diameter must be 10. And remember, all the circumference problems deal with diameter, pi times diameter. So we had to change the radius to its diameter of 10. So that ends up being 31.4. A circle has a circumference of 10, so what's the diameter? Once again, if you're going to multiply pi times diameter to get circumference, you're going to take circumference and divide it by pi to give you the diameter. Think of your fact families there. Think of whatever you do to one side of the equation, do the same thing to the other. If we divide out the pi on both sides, we're trying to find the diameter, trying to figure out what that variable is. So we have to take circumference divided by pi. So 10 divided by pi is somewhere around 3.18. And then a circle has a circumference of 63. What's its radius? Well, 63 divided by pi is pretty close to 20. Let me just check to make sure. 63 divided by pi. Yeah, pretty close to 20. There it is. So the radius is going to always be half the diameter, so that's going to be 10 feet. And then our last problem, what is the area of the shaded region? Well, what I would do is take the entire area of the square and then subtract the unshaded part, which happens to be a circle. So we have to find the area of this square, which is 18 by 18, because it is a square. And then the radius has to be 9 here. And we can find the area of this circle and subtract it from the area of the square. And that's what we end up with. So 18 squared is 324. Pi times 81 ends up being 254.34, depending on which version of pi you use, of course. But you should get an answer that's somewhere in the vicinity of 70 square meters. When I used 3.14 for pi, I got 69.66. But that would round up to 70. Let me just, out of curiosity, if I take 81 times pi, that gives me 254, and then when I subtract away 324 from that, this is going to give me a negative, but I'm going to take the absolute value. Yeah, it ends up being about the same thing. So there you go. That's study guide number 1. Why don't you go ahead and get moving on to study guide number 2, which is posted on the Classroom. That one will have to do with finding volume and surface area, and then we'll check it tomorrow and take your final chapter test on Friday. Take care.
Hey, feeling good.